Okay, so you're here because you want to level up your thinking, right? Like
Ah.
get to the good stuff quickly, no time wasted. And today we're digging into something that honestly, like our whole society kind of worships,
Hmm.
the chase for mega wealth and fame. But what's the reality behind all that? I mean, we've been going through some seriously eye-opening stuff that suggests it might all just be one giant golden illusion.
Yeah, that's the perfect term for it. We've got psychology in the mix. We've got personal stories. We've even got some like hard and fast rules to think about.
Yeah.
And it all points to something deeper, What actually makes us feel satisfied beyond the surface, beyond just, fortune and being recognized.
Exactly. So our mission here, right, is to cut through all the noise,
Yeah.
all the hype, understand why this golden illusion is so darn powerful. And more importantly, we want to give you some practical stuff, some tools you can actually use to define and pursue your own version of success and fulfillment. We've been deep in this really interesting Bulgarian podcast transcript. It's got like 3 different angles on this whole thing. So there's a psychologist's breakdown, then this ex-influencer who tells it like it is, and then some really straightforward golden rules to think about.
Yeah, and we'll be pulling out the main points from each of these, right? Starting with the science behind why we're so drawn to money and fame in the first place. Then we're going to hear straight from someone who rode that whole roller coaster of online celebrity. And finally, we'll look at some solid principles for building a type of success that actually means something, deeper. So let's jump right in. Why don't we start with the psychology behind this golden illusion? Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. Okay, so this psychologist we're looking at, he calls it the effect of the golden illusion. And basically, it's this powerful belief that if we just hit it big financially, well, then automatic happiness, right? Like game over. Even when, maybe our own experiences or what we see happening to other people tells us otherwise.
Yeah.
So what is it about our brains? Why do we think this way?
Well, what's interesting here is how it all ties into how our brains are wired for rewards. The psychologist, he talks about this Harvard research from back in 2019, I believe. And what they found was that even just the anticipation of success, right? Like imagining ourselves achieving that wealth or that recognition, it triggers our brains to release dopamine. He calls it, I think, the hormone of possibility, and it creates these, super strong feelings of excitement and motivation, like, let's go get it.
So it's the anticipation, like the climb, that gives us the good feels.
Exactly. And the psychologist, he really emphasizes this point. He says the actual happiness we get from achieving that goal, like say you get the huge promotion or your video goes crazy viral, it's usually pretty short-lived, like 3 months, based on his understanding of the research. And that's a huge part of the golden illusion, right? We just keep thinking, okay, the next big thing, that's going to be it. That'll bring the lasting happiness. But so often, the payoff just doesn't live up to what we expect.
Okay, so if actually achieving the thing doesn't give us long-term happiness, then what keeps us stuck in this loop? What's going on in our heads?
Well, the psychologist points to 2 major psychological processes that are at work here. First is hedonic adaptation. Basically, we humans are incredibly good at adapting. When something new and exciting happens, let's say winning a ton of money, yeah, at first it's a rush of happiness. But as time goes on, we get used to this new normal, our baseline shifts. And then we start comparing ourselves not to where we were before, but maybe to people who have even more. So it's like the finish line keeps moving. And, this might even go back to our survival instincts, right? Like we're always programmed to seek improvement. But in our modern world, that instinct gets kind of twisted and applied to this idea of never-ending wealth.
Yeah, it's like we get the new car, the bigger house, and then boom, we want the
Yeah.
even newer, even bigger version. Okay, what's the second thing going on here?
That would be social comparison. And man, this one's been amplified like crazy in our super connected world, right? Especially on platforms like Instagram. The psychologist, he brings up this study from Nature Human Behavior back in 2021. And they found a pretty big correlation, something like 17%, between looking at all that luxury stuff online and feeling less satisfied with your own life. And think about it, right? When we're bombarded with these, picture perfect, often totally unrealistic images of people living these lavish lifestyles, it warps our sense of what's normal, makes us feel like we're coming up short. It's like everyone else is living in this movie, this highlight reel, all the time.
Right. It's like keeping up with the Joneses on steroids. And half the time the Joneses is probably faking it anyway, or, renting the lifestyle for the Eurogram.
Totally. And the psychologist makes this really important point. It's not that having money is bad in itself. The problem is when we make it the ultimate goal, the end-all be-all. He compares it to things that we know bring us a deeper sense of well-being. Things like strong connections with people, having a purpose. Those are things that money can't buy, no matter how much you have.
So true. So how do we change our mindset about money? Like, how can we use it to actually improve our lives, make us happier?
Well, he gives us this really practical tool he calls the 3F rule: finance, freedom, fulfillment. Basically, it's about seeing money as a way to buy time. That's the freedom part, right? Being able to choose how you spend your most valuable resource. And then using money to create experiences that bring genuine fulfillment, not just collecting more and more stuff. So it's shifting the focus from, the number in your account to what that money actually allows you to do and experience. Like, think about someone who uses their resources to volunteer for a cause they're passionate about, or to just spend quality time with their family. That's fulfillment in action.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way to look at it. So what other strategies does he suggest for dealing with this whole golden illusion?
He talks a lot about having a social diet, which I thought was interesting. It's like, just like we're careful about the food we put on our bodies, we should be careful about what we feed our minds, especially online. He specifically recommends limiting the accounts or people you follow that constantly make you feel envious or inadequate or like you're not enough. He even says, and this might sound extreme, but maybe just unfollow those accounts altogether. It's about protecting your mental and emotional space.
Yeah, like consciously curating your online world for a healthier, happier you. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then there's this really powerful exercise he calls the deathbed test. It's basically about perspective, right? So you imagine yourself at the very end of your life, looking back, and you ask yourself, will I be proud of the choices I'm making right now? All this chasing after wealth and fame, is that what's really important? If the answer is a big fat no, then it's probably a sign that you might be caught in the golden illusion and need to rethink your priorities. It makes you think about your legacy beyond just material success.
Man, that's a heavy question, but super valuable. Gets you thinking, for sure.
Yeah, it does. And the psychologist, he sums it all up really well. He says, gold is a metal, happiness is a choice. Don't forget to dig for the real treasures. It's a good reminder that real contentment, it comes from within and from the connections we build, not just from what we achieve or what we own.
Totally. Okay, so we've looked at the psychology behind this pull towards wealth and fame, right? Now, I want to get into someone's actual lived experience. This source we have, it includes an interview with a woman named Eleanor. She's a former influencer. And her quote, it just hit me hard. She said, when everyone loves you, but no one knows you, that's not fame. It's a lonely prison.
Yeah, I think Eleanor's story really brings a human element to it, contrasts with the picture-perfect image we often have of being an influencer. And she describes how, at first, online fame felt like a drug to her. All the positive comments, getting access to these exclusive events, the VIP treatment, it's easy to see how that constant validation could get addictive.
Right, and she mentioned feeling that she was constantly living in this mirror, always focused on her online image instead of who she really was. That sounds incredibly lonely.
Yeah, it does. And she talks about this turning point, right? It was at a party with all these other online personalities. And even though she was surrounded by people who knew her online persona, it hit her that none of them really knew her. Her anxieties, her relationship with her family, what she was passionate about, it was like she was just playing a role defined by her online image and the content she created.
Yeah, and it really highlights how surface level so many online connections are, right?
For sure. Eleanor, she actually describes social media as a factory for loneliness, which I thought was really powerful. You can have thousands, millions of followers, but those connections often lack the depth, the realness of genuine relationships. They can look pretty on the outside, but when you actually need support, they're not there.
And there was this one incident, right? Something that really drove this home for her.
Yeah, she talked about this time when she was feeling super down, like genuinely distressed, and she started crying during a live stream. And instead of getting messages of real concern, people checking in on her, she got flooded with these superficial reactions, heart emojis, fire emojis, but like very little actual empathy. And it was this huge wake-up call. Her audience wasn't really seeing her. They were just consuming this performance.
Wow. Talk about feeling isolated. It's like the online persona had totally taken over her real identity.
And what's even more disturbing is that Eleanor, she started to believe it herself. She looked in the mirror one day and felt this disconnect with the person looking back. And that's what led to her, pretty drastic decision to just delete her entire online identity, like wipe it clean. It was her way of reclaiming herself from this digital mask she had created.
Wow. So after leaving that whole world behind, what was the biggest thing she learned?
She really emphasizes the difference between being looked at and being truly seen. All that online fame, it brought her a ton of attention, but very little real understanding, real connection. And she compares that to her life now, working at a bookstore, writing poetry, and having a small group of close friends who know her, flaws and all, when the makeup comes off, is how she put it.
Sounds like she traded a huge but ultimately shallow online presence for a smaller, more meaningful existence in real life.
Exactly. And she gives some really strong, almost like a warning to anyone chasing online fame. She says, ask yourself this: who will come to my funeral? And if the answer is mostly fans who don't know the real you, then her advice is run fast. It's a harsh image, but it cuts through the BS and makes you focus on what actually matters, right? Genuine human connection.
It's a sobering thought, for sure, but really puts things in perspective. Okay, so we've got the psychologist's insights and a firsthand account of what it's actually like to live in that world of online fame. Now, let's look at what our source calls the golden rules for finding real success, the kind that goes way deeper than just appearances. And the first one is this: be rich, not just seemingly so.
Yeah, and this rule really flips the script on how our society often equates wealth with, showing off.
Yeah.
The source actually cites this Harvard study from 2023, and get this, they found that 78% of millionaires who are all about displaying their wealth, the big houses, the fancy cars, they report being more stressed than the average worker. So it's like all that pressure to keep up that image, it comes at a cost, a big cost.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising. But it makes sense when you think about it, all that anxiety to maintain the facade.
hmm
So then, how does the source define true wealth, if it's not about all the outward stuff?
They break it down into three main things: time, health, and relationships. Real wealth is about having control over your time, your most valuable asset. It's about having enough financial security to take care of your health without freaking out. And it's about cultivating relationships with people who value you for you, not for what you have. It's a much broader view, right? It puts well-being and connection front and center, not just how much stuff you've accumulated.
Those definitely feel like more sustainable and ultimately more fulfilling measures of wealth, right?
Totally. And they actually give you, the listener, a really cool exercise to try. Take a minute and write down 3 things you would do if money was no object. Like, what would you pursue? What would you create? What experiences would you have? The idea is that these 3 things, they act as your true compass, pointing you toward what really lights you up, regardless of financial pressures.
Love that. It's a great way to get clear on what you're truly passionate about. And there's this quote here that I love: rich is the one whose passive income covers their soul, not just their wardrobe.
So good, right? It captures the idea that true wealth isn't about material comfort or fancy clothes. It's about having the resources to pursue what gives your life meaning and purpose, to nourish your soul.
Okay, so the second golden rule is this: fame is temporary, calling is eternal. And this really connects with what Eleanor was saying, right?
Yeah, totally. And the source uses this really great analogy. They say fame is like fireworks, right? Big and flashy in the moment, but ultimately it fades. And calling, they compare it to a star. It burns steadily and quietly, but its light lasts for like eons.
Yeah.
It's about the difference between, the spotlight fading and having this deep sense of purpose that drives you, that contributes something to the world.
And they use the example Van Gogh, which is so fitting. Like, he was practically unknown during his lifetime, but now his art is considered priceless and inspires people all over the world.
Right. And he painted because he had this inner drive to create, to express himself. He wasn't chasing trends or trying to please the masses. And the source gives us 2 key questions to figure out our own calling. First, what would I do even if I wasn't getting paid for it? And then that deathbed test comes back. Will I be proud of the impact I've made and the legacy I leave behind? These questions really make you look beyond external validation and consider what truly motivates you, what you want to contribute in the long run.
Yeah, those are deep questions, but super important to ask ourselves.
Mm.
And the last golden rule is one that, honestly, I think a lot of us struggle with: learn to say no.
And it's so crucial, right? Our source points out that society basically pushes us to say yes to everything. More opportunities, more commitments, more demands on our time and energy. But real freedom, they argue, it actually starts with being able to say no confidently and gracefully.
And the guests in that segment, they share some really relatable stories about the downsides of saying yes out of fear or obligation.
Yes. They talked about how some of their biggest regrets, the most costly mistakes, came from saying yes when they should have said no. Yes, because they were afraid of missing out, afraid of disappointing someone, afraid of financial instability. And those yeses, they ended up compromising their well-being, their values, the things that were most important to them, like saying yes to a toxic client for the money or taking on unsustainable workloads just to impress their boss. Those are classic traps.
So how do they suggest we get better at saying no?
They offer two really practical techniques. The first is the 10-second rule. So when someone asks you for something, instead of feeling pressured to answer right away, just pause, take 10 seconds. And if your gut reaction isn't a clear, enthusiastic yes, then just say, I need to check my schedule. And that buys you time, time to think it through and decide if it actually fits with your priorities instead of just agreeing on autopilot and regretting it later.
That's a great tip. Creates a buffer, right? So you don't feel trapped. What's the second technique?
The second one is about creating a personal price list based on your core values. So what are your top 3 non-negotiables? Like maybe it's family time, personal health, or integrity. And then if someone asks you to do something that would require you to compromise or violate those values, then the answer is automatically no. No matter what potential benefits might be attached, it gives you a clear and solid framework for making those tough decisions.
I love that. It's about taking control
Right.
and prioritizing what truly matters most to you, protecting your time and energy.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your choices, making sure your actions align with your values, instead of just reacting to all the external pressures and expectations coming at you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key message we should take away about this whole golden illusion of money and fame?
I think the big takeaway from everything we've looked at is that real success isn't about how much money you have or how many people follow you online. It's about how much you're living a life that you've actively chosen, a life that reflects your deepest values and priorities. It's about being intentional and being true to yourself.
And recognizing that the real luxury isn't what you own, but the freedom to live on your own terms, right?
100%. The source actually shares this really powerful quote, it's anonymous, from someone who made a ton of money in crypto. They said, I thought I would feel like a king, but I felt like a museum curator of things. And it just sums up how empty it can be to accumulate wealth without a sense of purpose or real connection.
It really makes you question what we're all striving for. So what's our final thought for you, the listener, after all this?
Don't let the messages of the world fool you into thinking that the shiniest, most impressive things are automatically the most valuable. The real illusion is believing that you have no say in defining what a rich and fulfilling life means to you. True luxury is being able to wake up every day and live according to your values without compromising your soul for some fleeting, ultimately meaningless version of success.
And we would love to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself chasing something that promised happiness but ended up leaving you feeling empty? What's your experience with this golden illusion? And if you have any thoughts on other aspects of genuine success and fulfillment that you'd like us to dive into, let us know, because we are all about this. And always remember, not everything that glitters is gold.